Hello and welcome to another episode of the Poultry Keepers Podcast. In this episode, Jeff Mattocks and Carey Blackmon explain how you can help prevent heat stress in your birds so they can beat the heat this summer. This is the audio recording of a recent Poultry Keepers 360 live stream. Now here's Jeff and Carey.
If I tell you the truth, I'm dragging butt. I'm still trying to figure out how to sleep on a U.S. schedule again, but it's okay. It's all right. Okay. It's getting better every day. Takes about 10 days, 2 weeks.
Good evening, everyone. Rip's unable to meet it with us tonight. He's taking care of Mary. She is doing to be expected, and things are going as they should. Doctors aren't getting them information as fast as they would like, but aside from that, things are going. We did check in with him and talk about her earlier today. So just wanted to get that out of the way, settle your nerves. Tonight, we are going to talk about beating the heat. Obviously, unless you're one of our friends like we talked to the other week that's up in Canada, who's still having some really awkwardly hot temperatures, it's hot everywhere. I talked to a friend of mine in Indiana. Indiana earlier today, and it was like 95. So it's hot everywhere. So tonight we're going to talk about beating the heat, proven ways to prevent heat stress in your birds. How's that sound, Joe?
Sounds good to me.
We're going to start with the basics. And chickens, they don't sweat like people do. Internal temperature averages from 104 to 107. So they're already hotter. One of the reasons why they stay warmer in the wintertime than we actually think they do, they're already hotter in the summertime. So with that, we don't want them to get hotter. They're going to be flaring their wings. They're going to be doing all that kind of stuff. They're going to panic. We're all human. The other day, a week and a half ago, I was outside for a couple of hours, drank half a gallon of water. I was still panicking. How do you think would be some good ways to first look? How would you define heat stress? What would you say the scientific definition of heat stress is?
Geez, I don't know.
in
Nobody's ever
farm
asked me that
terms.
question. Yeah, I mean, pretty much when your day-night temperatures, like, and I explained this to a guy earlier today, right? You take your nighttime low, your daytime high, you add the two together, right? And you divide by 2, and I'm looking at your 24-hour ambient temperature, right?
Yep.
If you're 100 during the day and you're 80 at night, that's 180. You're at 90-degree average. You need to do something at 90-degree average. I should slow down. Not everyone does math the same as I do.
Yeah,
But
we have learned that a lot lately.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. Pretty much when you're 80 plus, 85 plus, we need to start looking for ways to make the birds a little bit more comfortable. And we've talked about it a lot over the years on the show, individually with people in the groups. There's a lot of things you can do. Okay. I can run right down through the checklist if you like, but number 1 is shade. 2, you try and orient your pens or whatever's holding your birds to capture as much natural airflow as there can be. And I realize there's days here coming up in August, right? The air don't move and it just sits there and bakes you. So shade, capture as much airflow as you can. Right. You can even consider getting some of the big livestock fans. They make 4-foot fans, right? So if your birds are in a housed area, right, you don't have them out on runs where they can get shade and fresh air or moving air, you got to invest in fans. And nowadays you can do fans with misters, right? You can put little mister kits on the front of those fans, and it ain't rocket science. And you can move almost like a homemade swamp cooler. So
last year when we talked about that, I got the idea. I looked on Amazon, which is one of my favorite places to look for stuff, because I don't have a gardening supply house local to me. So I got one of the kits, a pressure reducer to drop your hose pipe pressure down to like 25 pounds. And I think it had 200 feet of 1/4-inch tube in it. a bunch of teas, a little mister nozzle to go on the other part of the tea. And what I did was I ran part of it through my fence area, and then I just started running it through my breeder pens up towards the top. And once I got it in place throughout everything, which took most of the 200 feet, I just went back and zip tied on the wire, the hose to keep it in place. And then I cut a notch, put my key in there with the connections, and my birds, put the garden hose thing on a timer to have it come on from 11 to 1:30 in the afternoon. And
Yeah. And the first and second time they come on, the birds freak out about it because it's new.
Yep.
It's different.
they
Right.
did.
And after about 3 days, they figure out this feels really good. And they're in. They're all in. Not a problem.
And I'll also say this in August, like you're talking about earlier, with no wind, when the true dog days of summer, typically it's also very dry. And I didn't like my birds' feathers had more sheen to them than they had any other summer. And I attribute that to the misters. Like it worked out really well. And a lot of my pens also have a 12-inch fan in the top that blows air down, and it just blows straight down, but it keeps air moving even when the wind's not. So that they really like that.
Now, your sheen also, over the last couple of years, you've been constantly like tweaking and improving your feed formula. So I'm not saying that the misters helped and keeping them comfortable helped. In the summer will dry out feathers. That's 100% true. But with the corrections you've made to the feed by getting the fat levels right, getting the amino acids and the proteins and everything else where they need to be, you're enabling the bird to maintain that healthier look longer.
Yeah. And I mean, that also helped. I'm not going to say that eliminated the heat stress
No.
by no means, but it definitely made it better, I feel like, with the fans and the water.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And trying to figure out, and not everybody can do this, right? You can do this. Some people can do this, but when you get a feed formula where you can reduce the corn and you have that higher fat level, you're getting more energy from fat, which has the least amount of body heat increase during digestion. And so imagine this, but corn has 1,500 calories per pound. Fat, as like cooking oil and dietary fat, has 4,000. So it's a 2.5 to 1 offset. So for every 2.5 pounds of fat added to the diet, or for every 1 pound of fat, I can replace 2.5 pounds of corn. Because when starch and carbohydrates digest, and we know this, right? You go eat a high starchy diet in the middle of August, and your body
really hot.
Yes, because it requires a lot of oxygen, pulls a lot of oxygen to break those carbohydrates and starches down. And during that oxidation process, you have increased body heat, right? You don't have nearly that body heat increase from using higher levels of fat. Okay. But now the commercial industry uses vitamin C. So they'll add between 1 and 2 pounds of ascorbic acid, by technical name for vitamin C.
Right.
People could consider, like we've told people about the homemade electrolyte mix. You could actually add some lemon juice to that or some vitamin C and even kick that up a notch as far as relieving heat stress. As it is, it does a nice job of relieving heat stress. But if you wanted to take it to the next level, adding some natural vitamin C to that mix is going to get you even further. But yeah, commercial industry manages heat stress by adding vitamin C. Plus all their barns have big fans in them. They're moving air constantly.
Oh yeah, they're huge fans.
Huge. Yeah. And
so we have a question here.
Okay.
Cassie wants to know, what suggestion do we have to beat the heat when your birds are stuck at a fair or any other poultry show for that matter?
Not a whole lot you're going to do other than, like I said, if you did the homemade electrolyte mix or you buy it, and adding some vitamin C to that mix. So that base mix is 2 ounces of vinegar, apple cider vinegar, 1 ounce molasses, 1 tablespoon of grated ginger, a teaspoon of salt, and like a quarter teaspoon of Tabasco sauce. The reason for the Tabasco sauce, folks, is it dilates tissue in the digestive tract, which allows for faster absorption. Okay. We're not trying to make Mexican chickens. That's not the purpose here. So it actually has a scientific purpose for the mix being in the mix. Now, to that mix, you could add 2 ounces of lemon juice or some type of vitamin C delivery.
Squeeze an orange.
Yeah. And it helps with the flavor. The birds are going to appreciate it, and it's going to take you up a notch on that heat stress management for sure.
And I'll also add one thing that I have done when transporting birds, which should also be done at a show. Everybody knows that we have toddlers. And at one point, a couple of years ago, we took some of the kids to Disney World, and we got a battery powered fan to clip to a stroller. And over the years, transporting chickens in the summertime, like in an enclosed trailer, I have used that battery powered fan to help cool the birds. If you got some that are stuck, just stick the fan out there by them. I'm sure the birds next to them will appreciate it too.
Battery operated fan or a rechargeable battery operated fan definitely is a good option. You see a lot of those people carrying them in hotter places. So, yeah.
Also, the ones that are battery powered that have the squirt bottles on them, you could hit your bird with that every now and then. That would help out too while you're at a fair. So, what are some ways that we could, let's say you're hot too, because it feels like it's 110 outside. What's some ways that you could go out there, quickly check on your birds during the day and know, hey, we got a problem. We've got heat stress, like they're showing signs. We need to do something. What are some things that you can look at and see on your birds to know real quick that there's a problem?
You already mentioned it, but they're going to have their wings flared. They're going to have their wings lifted, allowing more airflow under the wing where there's a lot of trapped heat. And those are the early signs. And then you're actually going to see open mouth breathing, like panting going on. And by the time you get to panting, I start to worry, because now they're respirating out more moisture by breathing through their open beak than breathing through their nostrils. So they're transpiring more moisture. It's being expelled out through the lung. And we just got to make sure, working across many different genres of poultry keepers, I honestly will tell you the number one mistake I see is people put their drinking or their drinkers in direct sunlight. And that is the number one mistake. Chickens are not sun worshipers. And I've watched a lot of chickens die because they would rather sit in the shade and not drink than have to go out into direct sunlight between 10 and 3 in the afternoon. They will avoid going out there to drink that water. Plus, the water's really hot being in that direct sunlight. So just not a good combination. A couple years ago, I had suggested to Carol Wilson down in Odessa, Texas, to get some cheap, like 20 quart coolers, 24 quart cooler, whatever, cheap cooler, and plumb those up to run gravity flow to her drinkers. And in there, then she could freeze like 1 gallon of blocks of ice, fill that up with water, and could be serving cold water all day, right? Through whether it's a small nipple line or something like that.
So what I've started doing is I'll go to a show and I'll see the 1/2 gallon water cups that they have for the cage cups that are like ginormous. If you take those and put all the way, but about an inch worth of water in them. Put that in your deep freeze in the afternoon, they'll freeze overnight.
Yep.
And everybody knows that I have a lot of automatic waters that use a 5-gallon bucket as a reservoir. I put 3 or 4 of those in the bucket and it cools down everything that's in the line. And those huge chunks of ice will last several hours, even in hot water. So that, I know it's not ice water, but it's a lot better. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because I've seen this in several groups, is a lot of people, when they do see their birds panting or they see watery droppings, they panic and then they want to go get ice water and give it to the chickens. Personally, I wondered if that would not cause them to go in shock. And so I wanted to ask you about your opinion and how you felt on that.
They're not going to go into shock, but they're not going to drink as much of that as we want them to. Okay, so really cold water, like below, say, 50 degrees, they're going to avoid drinking that just as much as they're going to avoid drinking water that's over 100 degrees because it's been in the sunlight. Right. So if we can keep water like 65 to 85 degrees, they're going to drink that. Okay. Because it's still way lower than their body temperature.
Yeah.
I see a lot of waterers out there. I see a lot of drinkers. And if you went out and did a temperature check at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in some climates, it's going to be well over 100 degrees. Right? The bird only drinks it because it needs to, not really because it likes it. So figuring out a way to serve some cooler water, particularly during the peak heat, like from noon to 4, is going to be pretty critical. I don't know how everybody does that. I don't have a system in my mind that's going to work for everybody. Like I had suggested to you earlier today and yesterday is if I had a circulation system where the water was always moving, one, that encourages, everybody knows a chicken likes to go chase water. And why they do that, I don't know, but they like moving water. So if you could have a recirculation system, you can actually have that come back to one single large reservoir that is on a float, that's automatically getting filled. You can pump it with a pond pump or something like that. Low voltage, doesn't take a lot, but keeping that moving. Now, you could put a larger chunk of ice in that reservoir to keep that water at a really nice temperature. And it sounds like a lot of work, and people, I can see their eyes rolling back in their head, but I've seen this working with a little bit of thought, just a recirculation system, especially if your pens are all lined up in a straight row, or if your birds are all in one group, working on a circulating system of water, they for sure drink more water. And the more water I can get into them through this upcoming next month, it's going to be really important.
And not only that, but when you hatch out chicks, them drinking a lot of water as a chick is also very important. So something like that wouldn't just benefit in the summertime. It would benefit year round, because in the wintertime, the running water is not going to be as susceptible to freezing as still water, which is the twofold behind my thought process. What I was originally thinking is using some gutters and put gutters in the pen, like a foot section or whatever, and then using a flexible hose to connect them and just have a pump pushing water to them all the time and pulling it back into 30-gallon drum and circulating that way. But I'm going to try it on a smaller scale. I've got a couple of single pens that I'm going to try it with, because I know there's the size of the hose, the size of everything is going to play into a factor with pumping it and keeping the level up and all that mess.
What size drinkers are you using?
Right now, the birds in this area have half-gallon cage cups.
Those are pretty large. Now we're taking this to a personal conversation level, but I think people might be able to gain something from it. The 1/4-inch rubber tubing, some people refer to it as spaghetti tubing. If you drill the right size hole, and you almost compress fit it into that hole, right? You don't need a whole lot of fittings and other things. It's amazing on its own. So you have that now pumping where it's pulling.
Pulling instead of pushing.
Yeah.
See, I thought about that too. If I've got it pulling instead of pushing, it would probably be more even. So I'm thinking about that, because what I have seen is take a small torch and drill a small hole, use the torch to heat the hole up, push the tube through, and when it cools back down, it's really tight against the tube. I've seen that too.
Yeah. You don't even need the torch. The pastured poultry folks do this all the time. So you just measure your 1/4-inch spaghetti tubing, and you get a drill that's just under that by about a 1/16 of an inch. And if you cut it on an angle, you can get it started in the hole, grab it with a pair of pliers and pull it right in. And
Hey, there we go.
it doesn't leak. It'll hold itself.
Let's see, here's Bud right here with the Plasson, which he knows for sure that I'm a huge fan of the Plasson Bell Waters. Their 1/4-inch line that's made by Plasson has you use a 5/16 hole and you can pull it through like that.
Yeah, because I think the outside measurement on most of those tubes is 3/8. Being that 16th under, you can. There's enough compression / friction to pull it through there, and it's not going to leak. And I see this all the time. So it's a pretty simple situation.
And I will say this, I have tried. Don't cheap out on the rubber hose. Buy the good stuff and buy the black, because everybody's like, oh, black is summertime. It's going to be a lot hotter. Yeah, but you're not going to have algae in it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to have it pop in the wintertime. On Plasson Bells in the wintertime, the only place that froze was the little lip around that they drank out of. Popped out a couple times with a knife, chip it out, water comes back in. So that's worked out really good. Rob Guerin wants to know, what's the deal with his birds basking in the sun on a very hot day? Are they trying to kill feather mites or something? They'll fan near their wings out and act like they're trying to get every bit of sun they can.
And I sat here and read that 3 times. And Rob, I have no idea why your birds are doing that. Now, look, admittedly, I see chickens all the time. They'll pull into the sunshine and they'll bask like he's referring to. I generally don't see them do it for more than about 30 minutes. And once they reach a certain temperature or light stimulation, then they're back in the shade. I'll see them do it periodically, but never really for more than an hour at a time. But not every breed of chicken's the same. And turkeys, for instance, they don't care, right? Sunlight doesn't bother them nearly as much as a chicken. But chickens all were derived. My understanding is they all pretty much come from the old Asian game fowl, and then they've been bred for specific traits and crossed and whatever to get where they are today. But what I've been told by people smarter than me is all chickens are originated from birds that live in the jungle or under a tree canopy. So
that's what I've heard too. They all came from jungle fowl.
Yeah.
And they've been bred to do whatever over the years. I get it. Selective breeding, you can do a lot with that.
Yeah, and his are solid black birds, which, I don't know how long they're basking in the sun. Just my observations, I'll see him do it. And when I had chickens here in the backyard, I'd see them do it maybe an hour. And that was usually all they could tolerate. And then they're moving on. But my birds seem to prefer morning sun. While it was still a little cooler and late morning, they would catch some late morning sun, but never more than an hour.
Mine will do it too. They'll get in the sunlight and they'll scratch the dirt up to make it a little loose if it's not already. And they'll flop around in that crap, like, having a stroke or something. And then they'll just stand up and, okay, I'm ready to get out of the heat now. I was ready to get out of here a long time ago. What do y'all do? What's some other stuff that you could do that might help besides keeping the water good? Now, I will ask this. It's highly controversial in some areas on the
Don't do it.
interweb.
Don't do it.
Apple cider vinegar. There's that group that understands the commercial industry, pumps that stuff into their birds' water year round. And then there's the other ones that swear if you do it in the summertime, you're being cruel and to your chickens and you're going to harm them.
For the life of me, I cannot figure out where they're coming up with that like they're causing some sort of like lactic acidosis or something like that. They're creating more stress and they're dehydrating. I don't know where that theory comes from. I really don't. Okay, so I can't even track it back to see if it's valid, see if it's craziness or whatever. So I don't know. If somebody knows the science behind that, where I can do some research, send me a link, I'll read into it. But for 30 years, I can only speak to my 30 years, is we've been putting 1 ounce per gallon of apple cider vinegar per gallon of water.
This concludes part 1 of Beat the Heat. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a poultry friend so they can help their birds beat the heat too. Be sure to join us next Tuesday for part 2 of Beat the Heat.